Japan in the 20th century is a special industrial, military, and economic entity. By the time I'm recording this video, Japan is doing fine, much like their World War II ally in the West. Not the pizza one, the engineering one. Both countries are doing extremely well despite all the damage the war had caused. Germany is the figurehead of EU, the prince of the Holy European Empire. Japan had remained its relevance. However, there seemed to be something dark looming over the Japanese economy, inhibiting its growth like the early 18th. I, Arkham Hathaway, today is here to provide a new perspective, a new analysis about the much fetishized country, Japan. Most of modern human history played out in the Eurasian plate. There are cool civilizations outside of the plate, but Eurasia is where the main story of human unfolds. We can think of Eurasian civilization as the main account, and other civilizations as alts. If we take a closer look at Eurasia, we can see two island nations with their geographical position literally gifted by God himself. Those two countries would be Great Britain with the size of 240,000 kilometers squared, and of course our main character today, Japan, with the size of nearly 380,000 kilometers squared. Great Britain is right outside the English Channel, being welcomed by France, and the Sea of Japan is what's separating Japan from Korea and Vladivostok. The relations between the islands and the continents are delicate, not too close, but not too far. Why are the positions of Great Britain and Japan so good, you might ask? Well, they are too good to be true. Let me explain. Both countries could be flexible in their foreign policy. They can easily land and exert their influence on the continent when they are powerful. When things are not looking right, all they have to do is retreat back to their little island and defend the coast. The sea is better than any fort in the world. After the British have built a big, sexy navy, no continental power could land on the Great Britain mainland. Napoleon tried in Europe and failed. Kublai Khan tried in Asia and failed twice. Great Britain only had to do two jobs well in order for its sun to never set. First, the Brits must build good ports. The oily hands of the British merchant must reach to every corner of the world. Secondly, the Brits needs to ensure that the continental power do not unify under a single authoritarian rule. They started to grow a perfect British tree while cutting the rogue branches that went too far. Spain's getting powerful? Cut. What? A dude called Goodpart is trying to unify Europa? Cut. Germany is pushing hard into France territory? Guess I have to join the Entente. The Brits kept this strategy all the way until World War II. As the Meiji Restoration commenced in 1868, Japanese intellectuals had immediately identified the beneficial path for Japan, the path of United Kingdom. Science folks is taking care of the technical procedures as in factory and port construction, while the government officials build a strategic plan to burst onto the world stage. At the time, there are two main Asian powers Japan could influence, China and Russia. The Japanese lumber mills had strategically selected China. That was most beneficial for Japan because China had just started its own self-strengthening movement in 1861, westernizing the Qing Empire. While Russia technically holds territory in eastern Siberia, most of its forces are just fort garrisons, and the Trans-Siberian Railway was not yet constructed. China was, and always had been, the dominant power in the East. If Japan cannot drag down China once weak, Japan will never be able to enter the world stage. Here goes the First Sino-Japanese War in 25th of July 1894. It is not long until the Beijing Navy was completely shattered. Now, Japan had become the dominant power in the East. Here, some people might think that Japan should advance further into Chinese territory. However, that is not beneficial for Japan. Russia has started building the Trans-Siberian Railway and started to show more interest in the East for more support. Japan needs to cut Russia down. China knows that Russia at the time was a more hostile regime compared to Japan, and the Russians hold real territorial ambitions while Japan only demanded for war reparations. This led to an unofficial Chinese-Japanese alliance. The Brits had also sensed the tension between Japan and Russia and proposed an official Anglo-Japanese alliance in 1902. The conflict broke out at 8th of February 1904. Japan used the classic strategy, surprise attack. The Japanese Navy surprise attacked the Russian Navy in Port Arthur. No, not the one in Tasmania, the one in northeastern China, in Lushun. There are 4 participants in the Russo-Japanese War. The Russians going against all of Japan, the influence of the British, and the land army of the Chinese. The Tsar had ordered the Baltic Sea Fleet to head towards the Far East, going through the Baltic, Atlantic, Indian and South China Sea. The Brits restricted any resupply to the Baltic Sea Fleet, which will prove detrimental later on. The Chinese army threw away their uniform and started to wear casual clothes and calling themselves local bandits. So the Chinese government is not responsible for their actions, since, after all, they are no army, they are just outlaws. A maniac by the name of Maretsuke Nogi used the men as meat shields tactic and successfully took Port Arthur with a casualty over 40,000, which was unheard of at the time. Anyway, now that the port's taken, all that's left is the Baltic Sea Fleet. The real question is, what fleet? With no supply, the ships within the fleet have to fill every single corner of every single chamber with coal and food. Living conditions are horrible, and the German engineers, who obviously is not going to Asia with them, left when the ship was not yet fully constructed. How is this the fleet of an empire? The Baltic Sea Fleet was a pile of floating meat and metal. Japan soon cleaned up the floating trash. In defense of the Russians, Tsar Nicholas was indecisive and not the brightest man. The incompetence of the Tsar is what ended Russia in a few decades. Once, a global naval superpower was left with no navy, and Japan joined the world stage with 2 literal bangs. Because the British themselves are also gaming with Russia all the way in the West. The February 26th incident in 1936 saw a turning point for the Sunrise Empire. Many young officers, inexperienced politicians, had took over the government and made multiple blunders in the following years. They also tried to look to the British and got a completely different conclusion. They think that the British was successful because they have the Raj, with large landmass, big population and rich resources. They think that northeastern China, Manchukuo, is the Indian of Japan. However, this is a terrible decision because Japan had given up on their position as a naval power and changed to a continental power. This is bad because they had unofficially lost their alliance with other naval powers. Japan, under the rule of the inexperienced officers, was a delinquent empire, which the whole strategy is to beat someone up and get them to accept what they have lost. However, the Republic of China never accepted Manchukuo as a real country, but still as a Chinese warlord. This is really annoying for the officers because Manchukuo had zero legitimacy and they cannot establish diplomatic relations with other countries as Manchukuo. So, the natural response is to advance further into China, which is a mistake in hindsight. The China in 1936 is different to the Qing Empire in 1894. In 1894, China is a mess. It is a private property of the Eisenhower family. However, China had become a modern country in 1936, which is the acceptance and unity in ideology. Japan, under the leadership of the young officers, had used countless tactical victories, leading to a strategic defeat. Blah blah, rest of World War II. After firebombing and some other bombs, Japan was a country of construction trash, just like Germany, which also rose again, but they are not the topic of this video. The Japanese business module is one that is unique, and it is extremely beneficial in the early 80s. In US, car manufacturers sign yearly cooperation papers with the supplying company. In Japan, the contract is 4 times longer. In that specific era, the stability in manufacture and supplies was encouraged. The skill of individual worker is required, and a stable job was beneficial, since there are no other connection and sources back then for people to learn. It applies in all companies. The Japanese are so rich in fact that there was a common saying, "Sell Ginza, buy California." Ginza is a popular shopping district in Tokyo. Take what you will. Some Americans are joking around putting a kimono on the Statue of Liberty. Somehow, the unstoppable Japanese economy had gone stagnant. Many may assume the main reason why the economy stagnated was because of the Plaza Accord that the US coerced the Japanese to sign, raising the value of yen. This could severely damage the Japanese economy. Here's an example. Let's say that the exchange rate is 200 yen to $1. It costs 2,000 yen to make a body pillow. In order to make a profit, the body pillow must be sold at a price that is above $10 overseas. The value of yen is increased to 100 yen per dollar. Still costs 2,000 yen to make a body pillow in Japan, but now the body pillow will cost more than $20 overseas in order to make a profit. And indeed, this damaged the Japanese economy. The effect of the Plaza Accord should not last all the way until 2019. To suggest that the Japanese economy is still stagnating because of the Plaza Accord would be similar to suggesting that some African nations are not successful because of European imperialism. It is very outlandish. Colonies such as the Raj, Dutch East Indies, and British Malaya are growing extremely quickly. The antigen plaguing Japan is the exact economic structure that actually benefited Japan in the early 80s. The era of skilled workers and stable job had long passed. Right now, there is no requirement for skilled worker in a factory when it comes to electronic appliances anymore. All that is required is the material and a manual from Shanghai Precision for the workers to proceed. There are too much civilized citizen in Japan that no one in the lower class is willing to innovate. Yoshiaki Murakami, an innovative shareholder, was forbidden in that business structure. People with zero backgrounds always made the innovation from 0 to 1. Steve Jobs is a Middle Eastern orphan. John D. Rockefeller's father was someone who sustained the Rockefeller family by selling herbal medicine, in other words, a scammer. Thomas Edison's teacher thinks that Edison was addled. Since they have nothing to lose, they are willing to make the innovation. Now you may think the xenophobia in Japan must be the all-evil route. That is not the case. The xenophobia, nationalism and bloodlust died with the older generation of the Japanese. The younger generation of the Yamato people are relatively welcoming, and some of them are really cool. It is the overall distaste of non-educated people that prevents Japan from gaining success. All Japan could offer are the educated elites who changes the 1 to n. All they could do is add on to the already solid foundation of the old Japanese companies. When Japan is booming, the companies we see are Sony, Mitsubishi and Honda. The companies we see today are still Sony, Mitsubishi and Honda. In USA, a younger, better generation had took over. The computer company was IBM, but now it's Microsoft and Apple. The search engine was Yahoo, but now it's mainly Google. Now, is it the fault of the educated elites that they cannot innovate? It is obviously not. The rich, educated elites shoulder too much responsibility. If they use the money of the holy shareholders and take a zetsubotekina, a wild gamble at innovation, with low chance of succession, they will be looked down upon for being irresponsible with the money which is not even theirs. They'll be fired or impeached by their company. A personal suggestion to the Japanese government: some mild reforms must be conducted in order to break the stagnation. Currently, many overseas workers dwell in the streets of Japan. Don't be hesitant in giving them a permanent residency. Welcome them into the arms of Japan and accept the fruits of their labor and potential wits. Right now, a 25-year-old Japanese businessman can see his 60-year-old self from the mirror. A predictable future, no matter how prosperous, is boring, and a predictable life is not worth living. Japan, consider a change for the better. I believe in you. Fervently made, Arkham Hathaway.